So let's talk about these two strategies. The first strategy is that of a dedicated mobile website. So let me give a specific example of this. Here we have a website for United, the airline. And here's one screen where you can see that there's a number of things you can do, from booking flights to check-in to checking your flight status. And then each one of these, when you go to it, takes you to an additional screen that then simply allows you to enter a little bit of information. In this case, it was for booking a flight, so that you can say where you're flying to and from and when, and it can come back with flights that might meet your needs. So the important thing to realize about this is they've absolutely stripped down the experience here. It's much, much simpler. And they're saying, what are the most common use cases for this website from a mobile device? And that absolutely makes sense to do. The question is, how do you potentially go about building these dedicated mobile sites? And typically the way these things will work is you'll go to, in this case, maybe you go to united.com, but it knows that you're on a mobile device. It gets some information. When your iPhone or Android or other smartphone goes to a website, it actually includes a little bit of information. It doesn't explicitly say, oh, I'm an iPhone 4S, but what it will say is it will give a header in the request, and it will say a little bit about what kind of browser it's using. And there are libraries out there, little pieces of software that make it very easy to turn those into an understanding of, oh, that's a mobile device. And then your developers can write a script that will basically say, so if anyone comes with a mobile device, let's redirect them to a different website. Let's take them to or mobile.united.com. So often that's the way that you will go ahead with a dedicated website. And so what you do in the dedicated site, typically when you create a dedicated site, you won't actually replicate all of the functionality of the main website, and you'll just provide a worst case link back. So if somebody really needs to get the additional features that are incredibly uncommon for mobile use cases, they can do it by linking back to your main website, which still works on a mobile device, and of course will start to work better and better as, again, download times improve and screen resolution gets better and the processors get better on mobile devices. So when you're working with these dedicated mobile sites, it's really important to take the time to say, what are the key 3, 4, 5, 6 use cases? Just like in a previous slide, we had this example for united.com. So booking flight, check-in, flight status, my account, a smartphone version, which will work because this version was probably designed only to work with touch-based phones. So they've created a version that would allow you to work with other smartphones. And then more options is how United is covering you might need to do some other stuff as well. So it's important to take the time to figure out what those key use cases might be for your site. And then the question is, how do you go about building something like this? There are lots of ways of building dedicated mobile websites, but one that I'd probably recommend as a really good starting point most of the time is something called jQuery Mobile. jQuery Mobile is a great library that your developers can use. It's used for a lot of the dedicated websites, and it makes it very easy to create a website that is progressively enhanced. And what that means is that if you build something using jQuery Mobile, it'll work on an old Symbian device or an old kind of smartphone that kind of has internet access but doesn't really do a very good job of it. But it will work better and better as you have a more modern smartphone or a touch-enabled device. So for example, it'll allow you to use swipe gestures on an Android or an iPhone, but it will still work with the old-style Blackberries where you're only navigating using kind of cursors, and so you can't swipe in the same way because it's not a touch-sensitive screen. jQuery Mobile is a really good starting point if you're building dedicated websites. So if you're speaking with a developer about creating a dedicated mobile website, I would definitely take the time to discuss jQuery Mobile because it's one of the most popular tools. It works on a very wide range of devices, and it is a really quick and easy way of getting started. Somebody who's got experience working with HTML and CSS, the kind of language of the web, will be able to very quickly add a jQuery Mobile functionality into their site. So we've talked about this one approach, which is the idea of creating a dedicated mini site. So you're going to have yourcompany.com and mobile.yourcompany.com. That will be a different website with just the key features for mobile users. And that's one approach. There's another very different approach that's becoming increasingly common over the last year or two, and that's a responsive or mobile-first approach. So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about this kind of approach and how it works in practice. And I'm going to take as an example the General Assembly website itself and the excellent work that John Troutman has been doing on creating a responsive design for GA. So if we look at this screen, what we see here is on a desktop device, you've got relatively large screen here, and you see along the top you've got navigation. You see the top right, you've got education, community, locations, and blog. We've got the General Assembly logo in the top left, and then a little description of what we do, an icon image on the left, and then asking you to enter information to explore GA near you. So let's see what happens. And I've not done this as a video, but I've taken a couple of snaps of what happened when I resized this on my laptop. So I start resizing it, and we're making the screen size a little smaller now. And really nothing's very different. If I go back, and here, it's very, very similar experience, except for the fact you can see now, you can see how much that's been resized because education, community, locations, and blog look a lot bigger now. It's not that they're bigger, it's just that this is a much narrower view. But at this point in time, all it's really done is move things around on the screen to bring them a little closer to each other. But look carefully at the top right as to what happens when we shrink the browser just a little further. So in fact, there's a couple of things we can note. Firstly, it's got rid of that whole email thing. It's decided if I have to pick between the two things, I want to show you that we're in the business of being a global network of campuses for technology and business and design. And while we'd love your email address, the decision was made that this is more important. It's more important to make it clear what business we're in. But look at the top right. The navigation's gone. Instead of having a bunch of links there, now what it has is just a little icon which is supposed to give you the sense that there's some way to get to navigation there. And in fact, when I click on that, even though I'm still on a desktop, even though I'm not on a mobile device, I actually get to a very mobile style menu that shows me the education, community, locations, and basically gives me the ability to navigate through the site. So you can see with this as the size goes below a certain size, it changes the experience. What's really interesting about this is it's fundamentally different from how we used to think about mobile, which is there's how it looks on a desktop device and there's how it looks on a mobile device. Instead, now it's saying it's much more a case of we don't really know quite what device you're going to be on. Because these days, who knows? You could be on an iPhone, you could be on an Android, you could be on a Blackberry or a Windows phone. You could be on some kind of tablet, a Kindle Fire or an iPad or one of the Google tablets. You could be on a laptop, but I mean, those go down to 11-inch, right up to, you might have a desktop with a large 20, 30-inch screen, or you could be on a cinema display. We have no idea which of these kinds of screens you're going to be working from. So rather than trying to determine what screens, I mean, you could be looking at an internet-enabled refrigerator. They exist, and some people are buying them. So clearly that's not in our standard user testing at GA, right? We didn't buy a fridge to see, a refrigerator to see how our website would look on it. But you actually need to understand that there's going to be such a broad range of devices that potentially it makes sense from responsive design to think not about are you on mobile or maybe tablet or maybe desktop, but rather just say how big is the screen area you've got to work with and how can we make this responsive so that it works first for a mobile device, that's the mobile first part, but that it will respond so that depending upon the size your browser is, it will give you a different view. And let's actually have a look at this on a mobile device. So because the other element of this is, are we looking landscape, are we looking portrait or landscape? In either case, it's important to realize that there are lots and lots of different aspect ratios and sizes that you need to work with. And the iPhone is relatively easy to deal with, but once you start looking at usability testing and working with Android devices, it becomes incredibly hard to deal with because there's lots of different versions of the operating system, lots of different graphical user interfaces on top, and what feels like an almost infinite array of aspect ratios and screen widths and sizes. So it's really, really hard to know what the experience is going to be for a given mobile user.